If you want talk, games, and fun all rolled into one, well, you've come to the right place. This is The Game Show, where host Bradley Clarke and his special guests talk about the world of television game and competition shows. But Bradley's guests aren't here to just talk. They came to play a game as well. What will today's topic be? What game does Bradley have planned? There's only one way to find out.
It's time to start the show.
You heard the man. Welcome to The Game Show. And here's your host, the Bradster himself, Bradley Clarke.
It's that time again. Thank you so much, Austin Angelo. I'm Bradley Clarke, and welcome to another exciting episode of The Game Show, the talk show all about the world of television game and competition shows. Now, I love to profile careers of professionals working in the game show industry because it's so much fun talking about many different game shows in such a short period of time. Well, my guest today has certainly had his fair share of game show jobs throughout his career so far, and here are just some of the game shows that my guest has put his stamp on.
10 games, each 60 seconds. Playing with household items can make you a millionaire. But first, you have to make it past the clock. You've got a minute to win.
It's time for Scrabble. These two families will play the exciting game of Scrabble like you've never seen it before. This is Scrabble Showdown with your host, Justin Willman.
Hello! What's going on? Welcome to Scrabble Showdown. True story, we play Scrabble like you have never, ever seen before. This is Scrabble's World of Words. Yes, it is.
See this chair? This is the million-second quiz money chair. When you're in it and answer simple questions, you make money. A lot of money. $10 a second, $36,000 an hour, $864,000 a day. You could win the biggest prize in game show history. Go to NBC.com or download the app now and play for a chance to be a contestant, and you can get in that chair. NBC's The Million Second Quiz premieres Monday, September 9th, 8/7 Central, live on NBC.
Craig Ferguson. Today, these two teams of custardy surprises will battle each other for a huge cash prize in a game that's all about famous names. And as if that weren't enough, our teams will be joined in the studio by two real-life celebrities.
Get ready to mix the stars. Kenan Thompson, Ellie Kemper, Tyler Hecklin, Sherry Shepard, Horatio Sands, and Jillian Bell, as we play the star-studded Match Game. And here's the host of Match Game, Alec Baldwin.
Welcome to Match Game. Match Game, the show that invites 6 celebrities into your home and straight to your liquor cabinets.
He's been a content producer, a segment producer, a writer, and even a guest host. You can currently hear his creativeness by watching ABC's Match Game, as he is one of the people coming up with 21st century Dumb Dora questions. Please welcome onto the program fellow game show fanatic, Jason Antoniewicz. Jason, welcome to the game show.
Oh, thank you, Bradley. And you've already won the first game, which is pronouncing my name. That was well done.
I already beat Fred Rogan?
I plead the fifth.
Well, I'm so glad that you're able to join me. And, we've gotten a chance to talk a little bit before, but I'm so glad that today we'll get to talk a lot more about your game show career as of now.
There's one subject I am never tired of talking about. It's that. So fire away.
Well, it just so happens that you're on a show where we talk about game shows. Go figure.
Great.
And Jason, you might be a producer and a writer on ABC's Match Game, but later for the game of the day, you will be a Match Game contestant, and it'll be up to you to fill in the blanks. So I hope you're ready for that.
Oh, dear. All right. My marker is akimbo. I am ready to write because I can only answer the questions with my pen.
All righty. Well, you ready to start talking about game shows?
Oh, please. Yeah, let's do it.
Then let's get into it. So I want to start off by talking about your overall interest in game shows. So when did your passion for the genre first begin? And what was the moment you realized that you wanted to work in the game show industry?
It's literally before I had memories. Best I can tell, I was just kind of put in front of the daytime lineups of game shows growing up and just sort of like symbiosis. It just came into me like a plant takes on water. So as far as I can remember, I've always liked it. I know that there's stories of me pretending the wall was the game board from Wipeout to sort of date myself with Peter Tamarkin, things like that. I guess it's always been in my blood. So I don't know if there was ever a moment, but I think what people know about me, oh, you're that game show kid. That's what they always remembered about me from school.
That's the same with me. I was the game show guy.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of it.
Yeah, same here.
That's funny because a lot of people know Wipeout as in the big balls Wipeout, but not a lot of people remember the Peter Tamarkin Wipeout.
From Paramount Studios in Hollywood, it's television's most exciting new game, Wipeout! And here to pit their knowledge and strategy against the Wipeout are Dennis Oswell, Cynthia Lee, and Karen Caldwell. And the one who cares the best could drive off in this century wagon. And now, here's your host, the star of Wipeout, Peter Tamarkin.
Thank you. Hi, thank you, Jim Hackett. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Wipeout, including you folks at home. You're going to have a great time playing our game.
That's one of those weird calling cards you can have. We'll meet some new people around town here who will try to establish their cred, and they'll say, I know both Wipeouts. That's one of those ones you kind of have like a secret handshake. You're like, okay, I know what you're talking about.
The secret code of the game show world. So back in 2009, while you were still in college, you actually co-hosted an episode of GSN Live with Fred Rogan. Now, for the listeners who don't remember or have never heard of GSN Live, it was basically a bunch of live segments that occurred throughout the afternoon lineup on GSN, and games would be played with people who called in, and special game show guests would come on the show. So talk about how you got the GSN Live co-hosting gig, because I think it's such a fascinating story, and it must have been such a great experience for you.
Well, any number of these contests that ever go on, whether you write in for them or go to them, it's almost like a pie-eating contest. You figure there's got to be someone who eats more pie than me and faster. But as it was, they went around to malls all over the country, and they put up a stage to sort of do a live game show, and they went around the country finding different hosts. So I kind of roll up to this mall and meet with a producer, and he hands you a set of cards. It's like, well, read these rules, read this question, talk to me a little bit, and just trying to get a sense if you wouldn't freeze up and you have a good voice for this on stage and can read clearly and all things like that. So once I passed that, I got on stage, and they just put you in this contest where you're just hosting sort of a rudimentary game show. You had 3 people at podiums sort of answering questions, and I just kept getting through to the next round and the next round and the next round, and oddly enough ended up against somebody in the very last round who I went to college with in Michigan, and it was the 2 of us up for it at the very last call, and I got the nod. So then they flew me out to Los Angeles to do a whole afternoon of GSN Live, which was a heck of a lot of fun.
And for those of you who didn't understand the inside joke at the beginning of the show, Fred Rogan was the host of GSN Live, and he flubbed your name a bit when introducing you, but I announced it perfectly when introducing you right here on the game show.
All right, you're watching Hollywood Squares, and the fun continues on the extended edition of GSN Live. Fred Rogan here with my co-host for the day, our Detroit winner of our GSN Live Play Every Day tour, Jason Antoniewicz. Well, close enough for government work. Welcome, Jason. Yes. How are you?
Fine, doing great.
All right, now, Jason, this is the first time you've been in Los Angeles?
Yeah, my first flight was today. This is a lot of firsts today.
You took your first airplane flight. How was that?
All right. You know, the in-flight movie, but it's all right.
You know, you flew for free. What are you complaining about? The movie. The movie. We give you a free ticket out here.
I know. I've already got the star treatment. I've already got that attitude. I'm sorry.
No, you're at GSN. That'll never happen. Anyway, Jason. Now, you work, you go to school at Central Michigan University.
Right.
You're a senior there.
Yes.
And really your dream is to do this for a living.
Yeah, I've wanted to be a game show host ever since I was that big.
One of the fun things about that is he was getting his makeup done around the same time I was, and we just talked at that time, and he said, I'm going to get it wrong, but tell me how you say it. And he's still doing the sports out here on Channel 4, NBC, so he's still a big part of the culture out here, and I think there's very few people who don't know who he is anymore here, but not as well known nationally any longer, unfortunately.
Now, you were in college when you appeared on GSN Live, and you used to host game shows throughout your time in college, so why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, and I don't know if that factored in too much as far as did they think, well, because he does that, should he win or will he be polished enough to do that? Yeah, at the time, I think I was in the last semester doing that. I had a sort of variety talk show thing for 3 semesters at Central Michigan University. It was ostensibly live to tape. It was just a campus news and an interview, and we got a game right in the middle of it. And that was a weird sort of good training ground for me as far as how TV formats work, because I was always so concerned early on with having the most interesting game in that segment. And I think one of the biggest light bulbs I have in my head is, I need the most interesting segment. It needs to fit in 5 minutes and make sense and be fun. And it doesn't matter what the scoring is necessarily and things like that. But yeah, that's what I was doing prior to that. So I'm oddly more comfortable in front of a camera than I am a live audience.
Introducing the MHTV men, Mike MacArthur, Matt Blow, Randy Oja, and Ryan Henning. Ready for action. Playing against the MHTV women, Shelly Castani, Terry Roswadowski, Sarah McVeigh, and Annie Jose. On your marks, let's start the MHTV Live feud. All right, welcome to the final episode of MHTV Live Forever. I'm Jason Antoniewicz, and this is indeed our battle of the sexes between stars of the MHTV shows. We're glad to have them with us here playing a popular game of feuding.
So what came about from GSN Live? Did you keep in touch with a lot of the people at GSN? Did that help you kickstart your way into the industry?
That implicitly was not a huge help, although it was sort of strange that you'd go to these parties, because the game show world, as it is kind of familial and small, and it's hard not to know everybody. So when we go to parties and stuff out here, I'll still run into producers from them who know exactly who I am, and I'm kind of surprised, and they said, well, we really didn't put too many members of the public on the air, and I went, oh, okay, that makes sense. So they seem to remember me, and they were very nice about taking messages and emails when I first moved out here and stuff like that, but it's weird how just sometimes the Venn diagram doesn't overlap, so I haven't worked with a whole lot of those people since, but I've certainly seen them in passing. It's all a good memory for everybody, for me, and I'm sure them working on it.
So what was your first job in the industry? How did you get your foot in the door?
I threw everything into my car in Michigan and drove out to Los Angeles, and I got here on a Thursday, and I think by Sunday I was lucky enough to be a PA on Let's Make a Deal. And I remember the fun part about that was you're on the lot and there's people outside waiting in all those costumes and the set's huge and there's props everywhere and you're thinking, okay, what am I going to do first? And they went, drive down to Anaheim to pick up a special roll of paper. That was my very first job in game shows, was running to get paper. Eventually on that job we had to clear a fire lane and I'm literally helping to move the giant Let's Make a Deal vault so that it's in a safe place, pardon the pun. And it was a brief thing because I was just filling in for people as they were transitioning from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. That was around the time that I got here. So that was my first job, but it was not very long.
But it wasn't long after Let's Make a Deal that you worked on Minute to Win It, right?
Yeah, not long after that, I had a friend working over at Minute to Win It, and they were doing game testing, which unbeknownst to me, a lot of prospective contestants run through, they called it boot camp of stunts, and they would just close 2 whole sound stages that the show wasn't even using and put up 60 different stunts. Some of them were new and some of them weren't, but they were trying to give people a chance to practice them and also see what needs adjusting, and so many people have played it, so what value is it? How hard is this stunt? And that was a heck of a lot of fun, because I was just administering the stunt over and over and over again. So I was lucky enough to get the $1 million game at one point. I was running the Super Coin game. I don't think I won it because I certainly spent a lot of time playing it while I was waiting for people to come up to me. It felt like a carnival, but I did see it happen, so it's possible. If someone had that as their $1 million game, I can attest that it is doable.
Supercoin. There are currently 12 billion quarters in circulation. In the next 60 seconds, one of them could be worth $1 million. In this challenge, the contestant must bounce quarters a distance of 15 feet in an attempt to land at least one inside a 5-gallon water jug. The coin will need an almost perfect trajectory across the stage to enter the narrow 1.75-inch mouth of the container. Completing this task in 60 seconds will make you a millionaire.
Super Coin is one of those games where I've tried and tried and tried again, but Super Coin is that one that I could never get.
Super Coin, for anyone who's in college, it's just super quarters. You're bouncing a quarter off a table, and, you're trying to get into the mouth of one of those giant water jugs that are in offices. And I think that's sort of the X factor of it, is if you don't have enough quarters to practice it or the right distance, because what I found anyway is that the most successful people were just spamming it. They were just throwing as many quarters as they could and not giving a whole lot of thought to technique, because I think it's just as much luck as it is skill.
Oh, you should have seen me practicing at home trying to beat Super Coin. I made sure the water jug was 15 feet away from me and that I had enough quarters to last me for 60 seconds. And actually, when the show was big, I used to keep a record of all the games I completed in my fastest times, and I used to create my own Minute to Win It games using household items. And what was great about the show was that it really was the new generation version of Beat the Clock.
Yeah, and I thought that was a very smart play on their point. Beat the Clock was fantastical and fun in the sense that they're breaking cups and saucers and doing all this crazy stuff, but the charm of Minute to Win, I think what ultimately made it successful is you and I both did the same thing. You just find things around the house and go, I could do that, and it's a shame it wasn't on even longer than it was, although it had a pretty healthy run as modern game shows go.
Yeah, the NBC version was on from 2010 to 2011, and then GSM brought it back from 2013 to 2014. And it's funny, sometimes now when I see pencils or ping pong balls, I get that urge to play one of the Minute to Win games for old time's sake and relive those great memories of playing them during the run.
Yeah, and that was one of the great things when I got to do subsequent boot camps. They were doing news pieces and explaining that literally you're sitting there with yardsticks and sponges and whatnot, and just like a kid playing around, who's just tossing a garbage ball at the trash can, that's kind of how they create the games. They're sitting there wondering, like, I wonder how far I could carry this sponge with this yardstick, and it's relatable to everybody. That's why I think it's ripe to be brought back.
Did you create any of the games?
No, I only did a couple of the boot camps, but that's another one too, where the nature of the experience, it's sort of like always going to summer camp because you're around these people for a short amount of time, but a very concentrated amount of time. You're only around them because the days are long and you're in close quarters physically or metaphorically. So I still see people who remember doing that show, even though all of us were sort of the equivalent of a cashier to a department store that was Minute to Win It. We all sort of just facilitated things in that role, but it was a fun role.
What were your favorite games to try out?
Well, there was one that involved balancing a can on a 45-degree angle, a soda can, because of the ridge on the bottom, which let you do that. And you had to pour out a certain amount of water to get the physics to work out. There was also another one with soda cans that I liked that involved guessing the number of coins in each one. And you'd have 10 soda cans with different denominations of coins, and you'd have to arrange them from low to high. And it probably wasn't a good spectator sport. That's perhaps why it wasn't one of their marquee games. But it was definitely very interesting to play because, you'd sit there shaking it and holding it and trying to weigh out which one weighs more. And that was probably among my favorites just because it was a cool mental exercise and sort of different every time.
The first one you mentioned was Tipsy.
So am I.
Yeah, it was the game where you had to drink enough liquid out of the 3 soda cans to balance them on their sides. Brad fact.
Tipsy. In this challenge, the contestant must balance a total of 3 soda cans on their beveled lower edge. It is impossible to balance the container when full, therefore the contestant must first drink some of the contents. Extracting too much or too little liquid will not allow the can to balance. Failure to complete this task in 60 seconds may result in elimination.
It's a good sort of parlor trick. Do it where you can spill something, but it's a very cool effect. And again, props to them for figuring out that can be done.
And I believe Tipsy was actually only played twice during a standard game throughout the original run.
Yeah, it's weird how sometimes some of those don't really seem to take off. I never get the secret sauce to why certain ones got to be popular or used a lot and why other ones didn't.
And then the other one you mentioned was called Play It By Ear.
Play It By Ear. This challenge uses 8 soda cans containing various amounts of pennies, from 5 cents to 40 cents. Using the shake, listen, shake method, the contestant must arrange the cans in order from the one with the least amount of change to the one with the most. Failure to complete this task in 60 seconds may result in elimination.
Just talking about these Minute to Win It games makes me hope that in the near future, Minute to Win It will return to TV so that I have an excuse to play all of these games once again.
Yeah, it's one of those that I think will be remembered fondly and hopefully gets another shot to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know how long it actually took to film an episode? Because there was so much setup that had to be done.
I think I remember, obviously it all depends on exactly what games you're playing, but the tapings I went to, maybe 2 or 3 hours a pop. And like any modern show, there's a lot of extended discussions with the contestant that they know they're going to cut down or they may want to put somewhere else. So there was a lot of that going on. So yeah, maybe about 2 or 3 hours, but they got off a couple episodes a day.
Speaking of GSM, we said before, you worked on 1 versus 100.
Yes.
The GSN version, which a lot of people, I think, forget about. It was with Carrie Ann and Abba from Dancing with the Stars. Now, I've always wondered, why did that version not have the Ask the Mob help, and they only had Trust the Mob and Pull the Mob?
Well, you have to remind me exactly what Ask the Mob is. I always mix up the names still to this day. Now, is that just where you pick one person to ask?
Ask the Mob is where 2 mob members were chosen at random. One had the correct answer to the question, and the other had the wrong answer, and the contestant had the chance to speak with both of them. Brad fact.
Well, I assume it provided a complication to production because that version, as you'll recall, was they were not there physically. They were ostensibly there by webcam, but there was a select number of people they could go to live. So as it worked out, if the question you were playing did not split that way among the live people we could go to. I assume they got rid of it just because logistically they'd have to make sure they're booking questions that their live mob members who they can call upon would be able to perform that function.
Right, yeah. And it used to be on Poll the Mob. Once you picked your answer to see how many people chose that, you were able to speak with one of them, and they got rid of that as well.
Probably the same limitation.
Were there ever any talks of bringing back the original scoring format and not the money ladder?
No, I think because it made it better predict payouts and production, you want to know where that's going to land and sort of have a sense of, well, if most of our contestants are going 5 questions, what do we stand to give away? And I think they wanted to pick up where they left off from the network version. That's the last format they landed on. It might have been something that was sold more internationally, because I know they try to go momentum-wise. It's kind of funny. You'll see that with Price is Right even these days. Some of the new Price is Right adaptations that come across the world are starting to look more like Drew Carey's Price is Right. You know, there's a lot of those weird factors that play into these decisions like that. It's often just bigger than simply, well, what will we do? 1 vs. 100 is a big franchise show that was, in China and all sorts of other countries and with a big company, Endemol. So a lot of those decisions just kind of come down to a lot of bigger influence at play.
Which format did you like better?
Well, this will tell you the sort of friends I have. We were just talking about this recently. I think I prefer, even though it's not the most game show fan friendly, I prefer the second one, if only because I had a logistic issue with, if there's a question early on in the game, when they used to give you money for knocking out each person, if I got a question right that 40 people got wrong, but I'm only worth $100 a person, well, why do I get less money for a question that more people missed? I sort of like the idea that your money was always tied to how many people you knocked out, period, in the game. So that was just an odd thing. I would think other countries do this with the format where I'd like to decide, I'd like to play a hard question for more money if I'm doing the first version where I'm knocking out people and getting paid for each person I knock out. I think ultimately what that format always needed, and again, other countries probably had a better swing at it, is making the danger for the players sort of equal to the mobs, because all of our American versions, or I'd say more so the network than the GSN one, were weighted in favor of the one, and you sort of wanted the mob to have a chance because you have 100 people there who are giving up their time. You want them to have a much better shot at getting some money to make that time worthwhile. It's not as sexy because it's another money ladder, but in the end, I prefer the second one.
I personally like the original format better, actually, and specifically when the format consisted of 3 $1,000 questions before a contestant could choose money or the mob, followed by 2 $2,000 questions and another contestant decision, and then questions were worth $3,000 to $10,000, and after every question, a money or mob decision will be made. To me, the money ladder, and specifically the amounts on the money ladder, were just too generic, and the game lost its originality in my mind, but that's just me. So moving on to another revival that you worked on, Disney Channel brought back the classic 80s game show Win, Lose, or Draw back in 2013.
3, 2, 1, draw! Get ready for Disney Channel's all-new game show. Where 2 teams of 3 have their drawing skills put to the test to win prizes.
Oh boy, this is going to be hard.
And each team have a Disney Channel star teammate.
I'm loosening up my wrist, getting ready to draw.
What more could you want from a game show? That's right, nothing.
The competition is on.
So get your pens out and catch brand new Win, Lose or Draw, only on Disney Channel.
And what was really cool about the new Win, Lose, or Draw was that Jennifer Convey, the daughter of the late, great Bert Convey, who was the co-creator and host of the original syndicated version of Win, Lose, or Draw, served as the executive producer. So did you ever get a chance to talk with her, either about her father or about her aspirations about bringing the show back?
Yeah, she was a joy to be around. She would be an ear to talk about the old show at any time. She brought us things from out of storage from Bert.
Welcome to the quick draw game that everyone can play. It's win, lose, or draw. Come on in and join our host, Bert Convey.
That's what I think. Hello there. Oh, thank you so much.
I'm curious, what were your thoughts when you heard that Win, Lose, or Draw was being revived?
I think a reason why they might have brought it back is just as a title it says so much, and it's something they own. It's one of those weird things that I think starts to be the Kleenex effect. Some people, when they're going to play a drawing game, might say, let's all play Pictionary, even though they're not playing Pictionary. And some people say, well, let's play Win, Lose, or Draw, and it all depends on what board games you had growing up or what TV shows you watched. So I think for them it was sort of win-win-win. Here's a title that parents with kids can go, oh, I know what Win, Lose, or Draw is. That's a game where you draw, and they can watch it with their kids. So I think that was some of the upside for them. One of my points of pride on that format was we had the caricatures of the stars. Just like the original show, we did a digital version of that. And the original cartoonist from Bert Convy version, his name was Overton Lloyd, and I reached out to him, and he was just thrilled that he was remembered, and he was so excited about doing it. And it just fell through for logistical reasons, as things do. But that was just one of those things that Bert Convy's daughter was very happy that I got in touch with him. And there was a lot of that going on. A lot of people very happy to just be involved and see the property come back, such as it was, even if it was changed from the original. That was one of the good parts about that show.
So when the format was being crafted, did the producers and the writers know they wanted to create a different format because it was kids and it was the digital age?
Well, yeah, right when I got in, they were still hammering out in what order and what we'd be doing. We were still doing run-throughs when I got involved to figure out which rounds were going to work. There was one that was, as I recall, I don't know if it was super passwordy, but it definitely involved drawing multiple words within a category, and that ended up going away, although I sort of liked it. I think it involved bouncing between the 3 screens and working on separate drawings, though that might have been worked into one of our bonus rounds later on anyway. But yeah, with any kids show, you sort of want it to be a little bit bigger than just a game. So that's when we had stuff like the magic wand that would draw in midair and sort of create a drawing on the screen and things like that, which was devised by Disney Imagineers. They got a lot of great resources being involved with Disney, so those were also great guys to talk to at the taping because they had multitudes of stories of doing things for Disney and just, again, were very fun guys to be around, very happy to be doing what they're doing.
My favorite sound effect from that show was the Get a Clue game. Get a clue!
Welcome to everybody. Let's get this party started, people. It is time to play. Get a clue!
Yeah, an awful lot of yelling in the sound effects. That's what I remember most. Didn't we yell at them to switch?
Swap.
There you go. Yeah, and we had the swoop from screen to screen. It's funny how much sound effects seems to be a concern in all these shows, but it's like people picking paint swatches. They hear a beep, a ding, and they go, it's not quite the beep or ding I was looking for. So I remember there was definitely a lot of hand-wringing over those different sound effects, even into editing, that they were still figuring out which ones to use and go with.
Do you see Win, Lose, or Draw coming back in the near future?
Anything's possible. A lot of the issue, I think, with doing a show specifically on Disney Channel is that it needs to be a little more evergreen because they're not going to be airing it quite like any other celebrity-based show where it's, tune in Friday for so-and-so's new episode of this. And especially with kids, they're going to grow up. So those episodes are not going to be the same as a scripted show because a scripted show, they can remain that age and that's the story you saw. But if they're there to promote their series, Dog with a Blog, and there's still 12, even though it's 2029 and reruns. So I think that is some of the logistic issues with doing a show like that for kids anyway.
Now, Justin Willman was the host of Win, Lose, or Draw, who I think is a fantastic host, and a lot of people know him from Cupcake Wars on the Food Network, but he also hosted Scrabble Showdown, which I absolutely liked, and, I was so disappointed when they got rid of the hub, because it had Family Game Night, it had Picture-Rica, and the Game of Life. They had a game show for that, and Scrabble Showdown.
Yeah, they wrote me a lot of checks on the hub, because I was a writer on Scrabble Showdown, and I was a PA on Game of Life, so I got to work with Justin twice, and he's a good guy. Having a performing background like he does in Magic gave him that skill to do game shows in a way that a lot of people can't, because he's just used to reacting to things as they happen, and sort of the same way a weathercaster is able to just tell you the weather and not have to read it from something. A magician is able to have stage patter and not have to always read things off of cards and just read people.
So what was it like writing on that show? Because there were so many unique games off of the Scrabble brand.
It was very fun because it exercised a muscle that I used a number of times, writing clues for the old Scrabble with Chuck Woolery and stuff like that, which I did not do professionally, but I certainly did for fun. So that's specifically what I was there to focus on. I was just a writer of clues on that, and that show certainly ate through a lot of them very quickly.
You just brought up the original Scrabble game show with Chuck Woolery, which ran throughout the 80s and was revived for one season in 1993. And GSN tried doing a pilot in the early 2000s called the Scrabble Challenge. Brad fact! And then, of course, the Hub created Scrabble Showdown. So what is it about Scrabble that makes it such a great television game show?
Well, like anything, when people are going through their program guide or they're flipping channels, if they see tiles or the name Scrabble, they're going to know exactly what that is. And it's a good shell to put around really anything. In the UK, they tried to basically play straight-up Scrabble, which works to a degree, but if you can use all the familiar branding and still do a compelling game, then that's priceless as a producer. So I think that's why it's tried all these times, because it's something people recognize, and that's what you need is a property. And that's probably why you're seeing so many reboots now, is because it's just instant recognizability with titles and music and whatever it is that they remember of the show originally. They just can grab onto that like a magnet.
Yeah, board games have always been popular as game shows, from Monopoly to Trivial Pursuit was another big one. You would think that more board games would be on TV, but throughout the years, they've landed, some more successful than others.
Yeah, and it might be just as much a testament to which way the wind's blowing. You know, at one point we were all chasing the next Deal or No Deal, and at some point seemed to be chasing the next reboot. So who knows? There could be a time where it's literally like looking at your board game shelf on the networks, where you're between Trivial Pursuit and the all-new Celebrity Operation. You just don't know what's going to be on. You'll never know what they'll buy. Don't you want to see what it looks like when Joel McHale is on the table and you're trying to remove his breadbasket? I think people would line up.
I think I'm going to go for water on the knee. Now, I want to talk about the 1,000,000-second quiz. That was a fun show, I'm sure.
The analogy of saying Game Show Summer Camp specifically comes from that show, because that was unbelievable amounts of work, but unbelievable amounts of fun. And that was a show that ran for 1,000,000 seconds straight live on the internet and NBC, and done in New York. There was a closed-down Mercedes dealership that they turned into our compound, where the set was on the roof, and we were underneath as the support staff with offices and everything like that. I find it 1,000,000 seconds of fun. Some people might have found it to be 1,000,000 seconds of frustration, but I found it to be very fun.
I had the chance to attend a taping of the 1,000,000-second quiz, and this was back when I was in the 11th grade. And I just remember being in awe of the hourglass structure set and the money chair. And as a viewer in the audience, it was such a spectacle to see.
And the crazy thing, I think, that was not quite appreciated when you're not there in person, which is true of a lot of things like stadiums and landmarks and whatnot. You know, we went so far as to throw light onto the nearby buildings, you know, just like how the set on Jeopardy would turn from blue to red. You know, we threw lights onto buildings and made that colors of our set, to the point, you know, as we're going on in the weeks, you look up in the skyscrapers and people are shining lights back at us as sort of a silent protest of, hey, well, if you're going to make my apartment blue, I'm going to just blink all throughout your game show here. So I don't know how many of those you could see on TV, because there were certainly very tall buildings behind there, but that was one of the things I was always amused as the taping was going on. You'd look up and down to see who was very happy to be our set and who was not.
And luckily there was only one rain out that you had to go inside.
Yeah, that show was a contingency plan on top of a contingency plan on top of a contingency plan. You know, one of the things we never had to do, but we rehearsed, was if all the electronics went down. And so one of my responsibilities on top of many was an army of us producers, if the electronics had gone down, would have rushed up onto the hourglass with various cards, looking like a giant What's My Line flip card to sort of keep score, you know, on each side, and another person holding up a cue card of, now questions are worth this many points. And we rehearsed it. We never had to do it. And that was a big lesson to me in producing, and that's sort of why I look back on that show fondly, because it proved to me that I sort of had the muscle to do it. You know, I would always be asking questions, you know, well, what happens if this happens? And I'd say, fortunately or unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, we had to use those plans that we made up, because different things would happen, and such is the nature of doing a live show, which isn't very common.
Why was the doubler only used on TV?
To take their answer, Eric, it's the doubler. 8-point question.
That may not be for me to say. I think the idea in broad strokes is to make the game they played 23 hours a day to be pretty straightforward. You got to remember that the people who were going to tune in to the game first online had no context. You know, there was not a host there to explain rules. There wasn't time for it. So I think part of the thinking that I can get into is that it made the game simple to explain and get on. If you just logged on and saw people answering questions and getting points, I don't need to explain too much to you beyond that.
And of course, you have to build it up for TV.
Right, yeah, but they did a magnificent job of otherwise making it look the same as the hourglass downstairs there, because that was a big part of my job, was doing those overnight games. Those are my key hours to be involved with 1,000,000-second quiz, was overnight.
How many questions were written for the show?
I believe at the end, at least as far as ones that were used, it was in the 11,000 range. And the quip people like to say a lot was, we wrote an entire season of Jeopardy for 1 week of shows, or, 11 days of shows. So somewhere in that range. Now, I don't know ultimately how many got kicked out, but I don't imagine many, because you don't get too selective when you need questions for 24 hours a day, 11 days straight.
Do you think something of that magnitude will ever be attempted again?
Anything's possible. The thing I always say about predicting the future of game shows is you can't predict the future of game shows because all it takes is one person. There could be someone who becomes the head of a network tomorrow who says, we need more live events and we need more things that strip across the week, and this would be the perfect example of that. Like a lot of shows, this traveled to other countries, and if another country brings it back and makes it successful, then that's a good blueprint for America to make it successful. I know there was at least the preliminary idea that another season or another version could be done in Las Vegas, and I think that sort of idea really plays into what made it work, because one of the fun parts about doing it was that New York, being a city of more foot traffic and a melting pot, just attracted people coming up to it like a game at the fair. Sort of, I can knock those bottles down with a ball, and so you can't do it in the middle of rural Michigan or something like that. There's not enough people, but there are ways, and certainly if the right person's interest is scratched, then they could do it.
Next, I want to talk about Celebrity Name Game, which you were a researcher on, and Celebrity Name Game is one of my favorite recent game shows, and I was so disappointed when it got canceled. But the one question I always had regarding Celebrity Name Game is, why did the contestants not get credit for just saying a celebrity's last name like you get credit for doing on most other game shows?
Well, I think the thinking is, based on the board game Identity Crisis. When it started purely as a game of names, you wanted people to demonstrate that they knew the name. So I think just saying Smith, well, which Smith are we talking about? It's that sort of thing. It's satisfying to a point in the context of a pyramid, because when it's one word out of 7 and it's the only name, that's fine. But especially when it was wall-to-wall names, you need people to demonstrate they know what they were going for. And, it made the game sometimes more fun or more difficult, depending on how you look at it, because sometimes seeing the people struggle is just as fun as watching them succeed. And it also provided a coherent, consistent judging standard of, well, they just have to say what is in front of them all the way through. Because we also had the complication that Pyramid didn't of, if I said Roosevelt and Teddy, well, my partner could just say Teddy Roosevelt. So you give one and you take one, I guess, as far as the judging rules are concerned.
When you mentioned how the first season was solely name-based, it reminded me of how I would differentiate the two gameplays over the run. The first season of Celebrity Name Game was a game where you actually named celebrities, but the second and third seasons were a name game that featured celebrities.
Exactly. And see, anytime you can just pivot on your title, that's perfect.
These are the things I notice. There's not just watching, there's a lot of studying.
That's right.
Let's talk about the wall now.
Yeah.
One of the elements of the game I'm still not sold on is the idea of making contestants drop green and red balls for doing absolutely nothing in rounds 2 and 3. Why is that?
Well, a lot of times what you need to look into and think about sometimes is, well, if I'm a network footing the bill on this, what could be done within the format to ensure certain things happen? To say control the budget makes it sound nefarious, but you want the game to be predictable to a point. Yeah, on Jeopardy, you can win hundreds of thousands of dollars if the daily doubles and things fall your way, but most of the time you're not, and we have plenty of data to back that up. So I think it's a function of the various tests on, well, what would make our budget predictable? And it's not necessarily to make sure the contestants win or lose certain amounts of money. It's just to ensure that we know what's going to happen. Because I imagine giving them carte blanche to drop them when they want would be very volatile, for instance.
Every time I watch, I always question, why doesn't the show implement more trivia questions so that the money being won or lost relies more on the contestants' knowledge?
Well, before we started taping, we had more questions in the game, and as it turns out, to fit all of that into 1 hour was challenging. So before we even taped one episode, there were just questions being slashed from the format. Free fall used to be 7, for instance, things like that. So you would think that, but that in itself is sort of a non-controlled thing, too, because you think you have a quote-unquote easy question, and you get the person on stage who hasn't looked up and seen that the sky is, in fact, blue. So you never know what you're getting, and so with a question, it's always a question, but with a free ball, and a free red one, too, you know that they're going to drop each one of those. One of the analogies I like to give is, I think if you're making a game, let's say, about questions, I find it weird when we're playing less of them. The idea is you want to see people win a lot of money, and here's the game we're doing for it. Well, the game you're doing is sort of important. Just like if I like seeing people win, I don't necessarily need to watch tennis to do that. I want to watch a sport or activity I enjoy. So I always am sort of perplexed at on some game shows where the game element is sort of minimized at the expense of the other elements in that show. So I'm always for more material.
As someone like myself who's always focused on making sure the game itself is properly being represented and is the main objective, I too would love to see more content on the wall, and particularly see more trivia questions be incorporated into the wall's overall game.
Yeah, and I think that's also just a testament to what sort of works in network primetime versus what would work anywhere else. You know, if there were a daily syndicated wall, you'd bet there'd be a lot more material, probably, just because to produce that day in and day out with the human interest story takes a lot more work. You know, there's the pre-tapes and finding just the right people. So I think that's part of it, too, because it's a soup of all of those things, the primetime current version of the wall.
Another curiosity I have is, for the free balls in rounds 2 and 3, why during round 2 are the 2 green or 2 red balls dropped together, but in round 3, the 4 green or 4 red balls are dropped one at a time?
I assume that also probably plays into the math of it. You know, a lot of these shows have an insurance policy depending on how much money they're giving away. So certainly a show that size has to be working with an insurance policy. So, you know, look at it this way. If you're dropping 4 red balls at once, if they were all headed for the 1, they probably all can't get there. They would knock each other out of the way. So if you're dropping them one at a time, there's a greater chance it could go in the 1 individually as each ball, you know, they're not affecting each other. That is one possible thing. Again, I'm not privy to how the different insurance things work, but that is just one educated guess, I would say. The same that, you know, I think it was the insurance policy when The Price is Right was doing their $1 million spectaculars that, you know, had to travel a certain amount because they don't want to insure a spin that is puny. So I think that's the same thing. They want to know that, well, is this event truly random enough or volatile enough to say, yeah, we'll put our money up for this?
Was there ever any decision of doing the red balls before the green balls in terms of the free ones? Because sometimes when I watch the end of the game and they lose $1 million and that's the last ball dropped, I'm like, no. But if it was a green ball and they won $1 million, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I honestly can't say that there was or wasn't because, you know, I think I was involved with it early on and then as they were taping. So you see different stages, whether someone thought it would be more dramatic to do the Reds last. You also don't know if they thought that gave them too much control over winning money. I honestly don't know. So I assume it was one of those things weighed out. But again, you had to kind of look at that Venn diagram of, well, what is the show that we can afford to do? What's the most dramatic show? Because it depends on the eye of the beholder. You and I might play that game as something that is a test of knowledge that involves some luck, and other people might see it as sort of just this human roller coaster where there's money changing hands and they could be rolling dice and shaking hands for all they care. It doesn't matter if there's questions or not, you know, so that's what happens.
So let's now talk about one of the reasons why I'm so glad you're on the show with me today, Match Game.
I'm glad there was a match game too.
Now, first off, what was your reaction when you found out that Match Game was coming back?
Well, I found out, crazily enough, we were wrapping the season on Celebrity Name Game, and it was after they had already been in production on the new $100,000 Pyramid on ABC, and that whole lineup was taking shape, and all of a sudden, here's Match Game. And a lot of the staff from Celebrity Name Game moved over to that, so the offices were starting to clear out as we were still taping shows there. So I was very excited, but also with sort of a pause, because Match Game is one of those shows that it was a very specific recipe that made it successful. You know, another show I count in that area is Gong Show. You know, Gong Show is probably 90% personality, and so was Match Game. They played that game in subsequent years, and it just didn't have the same spark. So you come into it thinking, well, are they going to adhere to the show we know and love? Are they going to find people that will make that format sing? So I was cautiously optimistic, and having seen the results of Pyramid, there were early pictures coming out and words about how the format was going with that you go, well, it seems like things are steering in that direction. So I was always cautiously optimistic until it came on the air, because I did not work on the very first season, but I worked on every season subsequent.
When you were watching the show as a kid, do you used to write Match Game questions?
Oh, yeah. It's weird. A lot of producers probably don't believe me that I have a relationship to all these different shows, but Match Game specifically, I watched the Ross Schaefer one when it was on and the one with Michael Berger when it was on and caught up on the older shows on GSN. So when I was in middle school, just play it. Kids didn't know what it was. They just knew they were playing a game that was fun and funny, to the point where they sort of handed me the class and said, well, here, you know, you're doing all these game shows that the kids like. Just do them as an assembly. So we actually got away with playing Match Game in the 7th grade as a class, and I've been writing them since then. I would encourage anybody, whatever it is you're doing, just practice it over and over again, because I sort of got a workout on writing Match Game questions since I was a teenager.
That's exactly what I used to do. Actually, speaking of Minute to Win It, back in 8th grade, I created math versions of Minute to Win It games. I used to wear my Minute to Win It t-shirt every single Wednesday because that's the day that the show would air. So I would always constantly talk about Minute to Win It during school. And my math teacher said to me, look, if you love these games so much, why don't you create math versions of these games and we can play them in class? And of course, I don't say no to creating games for school credit, so I did it. I must have mathified at least 20 different Minute to Win It games, and not only were they so much fun to play, but they were educational too.
Yeah, don't blow the parabola. I'm sure that was your first one.
Right. I did do a Don't Blow the Joker one. I can't think of what the math involved was, but I put it in there somewhere.
at least you had the quasi-educational angle. I was doing Card Sharks and Price is Right. I was going for the lowest common denominator. You were asking questions. So at least kudos that they decided, you know what, education is important too.
Exactly. The one I do remember was Ping-Tac-Toe. They were shown a grid of fractions, and then one of the combinations totaled 1. And they had to figure out which one was 1 and then get a ping pong ball in those 3 cups.
I'm sure you've mentioned it before, but you got to give thanks to the people that enabled you in this case, if you want to look at it that way. Because without encouragement like this, there wouldn't be people like us working out here who entertained our ideas. So what was the teacher for you that let you get away with this?
My 8th grade math teacher, Joseph Weichhorst, he realized that I was going to be big in the game show industry someday, so he let me create and host these Minute to Win It games during class time. So thank you so much, Mr. Weichhorst.
A good man.
Yes, a very good man indeed. And might I add, an excellent math teacher. I always love going to Mr. Weichhorst's class. So going back to Match Game, what's the typical process like when writing questions for Match Game?
We were very fortunate in that we were able to workshop them, as the seasons went on. Everyone has their individual process. Sometimes throw out the first sentence to one to the room and sort of try to finish it. A lot of times you have an answer set and a way to get there, but what makes it funny and worth putting on the show? So it's really collaborative in that sense. And every day, typically around 5 o'clock, we'd all read out our questions and play them around and write on cards and everything just to get the feel for it, because we as a group decided that over time just shouting out the answers was not the same, because I want to be able to cogitate on my own and think of something and then see what you wrote and get the genuine laugh reaction out of it, which of course is how they did it back in the day as well. Just round tabling and discussing and rewriting together. So whenever you see those names in the credits, it's kind of like a Power Rangers of all of us. We're all come together to be one big Match Game writing Power Ranger.
Will Old Man Periwinkle and Old Lady Purvis be making a return to Match Game questions anytime soon? Because they haven't really been featured in the new version of Match Game.
No, it's funny. I think that specifically, I don't know that we were told not to do it, but I always try to write Weird Willie questions, and I think the reason they don't go through is because, in the 70s, for some reason, Weird brought up one idea, and now people, without the show having been on enough times, or them not all being super fans, they hear that and they don't know what it means. If I just said, Weird Willie is so weird, he brought a blank to a birthday party or something like that, they wouldn't know what that means. Of course, that's not a good question off the top of my head, but you get what I'm saying, is that it just didn't get a whole lot of funny answers, so I don't know that there's a specific edict against Old Man Periwinkle, but we definitely hit the old note.
At least Dumb Dora is still around.
Yeah, we had a whiteboard of all the characters, and we would attempt to create new ones. This season that's on now, we're sort of humoring ourselves on the call-outs, as we call them. There was Out of Touch Orville was one I did that was on the other night on ABC, things like that. We just figured, well, if we're using the dumb characters so much, there are other characters that sort of do that for us, and we get a new name and get the audience to say something weird, so it's fun.
So do you ever look back on the old show and try to get inspirations?
Yes and no. I mean, I will watch it on Buzzer, but I think a lot of us particularly don't want to ever be accused of plagiarizing. They did so many questions for so many years on Match Game, we'll write something that is similar, and it just happens, because a game like that, you're going for the same sort of comedic area, you're playing on the brands like McDonald's and things like that have been around for years, so of course we're going to go to that well as well. So no, I mean, they furnish us old questions, but the biggest thing they provide for us is sort of ideas for the super match more, because those we try to generate and pull so many new questions that at the end of a season of writing, that's something that we're not exactly trying to do ourselves as much. We're okay once in a while taking some of the old super matches and pulling them again.
Speaking of the different terms that are used now, what I've noticed is a lot of people, online, they would say that some of the material is too raunchy or a bit too dirty. Is this because you've realized that this is a primetime audience, so you decided to go a little more adulty instead of so much family-friendly?
Match Game in the 70s was able to get laughs and sort of push the envelope saying tinkle and stuff like that on TV. I don't know that it necessarily means TV needs to evolve and getting dirtier, but I think it's sort of expected that if that show is known for being racy in its day, well, where is that line now and what can we do? And Alec himself is no stranger to it with Saturday Night Live and things he's done as a character, Jack Donaghy. So, it's all part of that recipe that sort of comes together. I don't think anyone ever aims to be as dirty as they can. They just want to say things that are funny, because we've certainly had questions get knocked down by S&P and not get on the air for being too dirty, and then some things that didn't get on the air because they felt like they could have been on daytime in 1973. So we're often just trying to find the middle and trying to tap into what people accept, like, and get into these days.
Well, speaking of that, do you find that a lot of the celebrities, they're just going for the laugh and not necessarily trying to match the contestant?
I don't know about that. I don't feel necessarily that a lot of them are doing that because particularly in the studio, you're sitting there watching them write and hearing what they're asking each other and trying to figure out. I don't know that any of them are necessarily going for the laugh wholeheartedly because sometimes they just genuinely don't understand the question and this is the thought that came to them. I think a lot of them, almost to a fault, care about the contestants. I'm sure there are exceptions, but generally speaking, the amount of time they take to write in the head-to-head is so long because they want to win for them and make sure they're coming up with the best answer. And I think that's a lot of why they're often looking at each other's answers is because they want to make sure they're in the right space. If they were just comparing jokes, that would be a whole different story. But particularly as the rounds go on, I think they're smart enough to know that when we get into second rounds and tiebreakers, that it's time to say something that they're going to say. I don't know how much of it gets to air, but a lot of times when the celebrities are in a huddle, you'll have Alex say something like, "Can you imagine trying to direct actors like this? They're all walking around the stage with their backs to the camera." He's indicated on a time or two that thinking together to get one answer in 10 minutes is maybe not as potent as one person's thought in 1 minute.
Speaking of the head-to-head, one of my biggest curiosities is, this is probably no one else's curiosity, but because it's me and I notice every little thing. So
sure.
On the super match, say the contestant gets the $5,000 for the audience match.
Yeah.
Now, in the original match game, you would get, say, the $500, plus you can play for $5,000, which was 10 times the amount. So you would win, if you won the $5,000, you win $5,500.
Right.
So why now don't you win $30,000, which is the $5,000 plus the $25,000?
In general, the thing to remember is that in those days, the 70s, we're talking a daytime show with networks that had an entire daytime budget, and it's sort of use it or lose it. If you don't give away your prize budget, then the network says, well, hey, you only gave away this much and we gave you this much to give to contestants. So in this sense, it again makes our budget sort of predictable. It's funny, I thought about that when it came to, I think, Celebrity Name Game. If we had awarded, say, the other team their money, and if you're giving an extra $2,000 a show times 150 shows, that's not small money. So it's a primetime show, but I think that's a lot where the mentality came from. Should it necessarily stay that way? I'm not in charge of the budgets, but I think that's a lot of where it comes from. You want to know that from a viewer standpoint, are there viewers who are going, they're not giving them the $5,000, I'm changing the channel. And I think that's what they're kind of weighing it out, is if we're giving $100 a match as a consolation prize, is that bringing $400 worth of viewers a show? Who knows? And I'll give credit. There's one guy who's sort of helping bring it back. It's Snoop Dogg over there on Joker's Wild, who's given the contestants consolation money, and they're not shy about that. So, again, all it takes is one person saying, gee, I thought they ought to win that, and if he's the right guy in the right position, then everyone goes, okay, we'll set aside money in the budget to give him that money.
Was there ever any talks of doing the multiply by 10, because that's how they always used to do it, instead of multiply by 5?
I don't know. I unfortunately was not there for the first season to know. I think perhaps the feeling, and this is just an educated guess based on working with them, is that if they lost the head-to-head but won $5,000, that sounds great. But perhaps the budget could not handle $50,000 a time on the head-to-head. They probably wanted to weigh out, well, we want to give this away a number of times, but we can't afford to give away $50,000 every time or something like that.
I would say, though, keep the $25,000 top prize, but the way to have contestants have a chance at $50,000 is by bringing back the Star Wheel.
There's an executive at ABC who tweeted that out at one point, saying to the fans at large, what would you think if we brought back a Star Wheel? And I'm not against it. Who doesn't like spinning a big wheel?
Exactly. A lot of people didn't like the Star Wheel or even remember the Star Wheel, but I love the Star Wheel, not only because it gave people the chance to double it, but you didn't know who you were playing with instead of just picking a celebrity of your liking.
Yeah, I think in general people like anything with a random drawing, anything like Punch a Bunch on The Price is Right, anything where today could be the day, when it creaks on that double and just makes it to a star and they get a chance to double their entire money, that's fun. And it adds a tension and a difference to every episode. Will this be the one where he hits the double? Was it the day where two people hit double? It could definitely be a fun addition if they're looking to do another season.
I'm curious about your answer to this question. Do you think Match Game will ever come back to daytime?
Again, it's possible. I think with any of these, they're ripe for syndication because they lived in the daytime at one point, and these shows are habitual, and I think it's possible. And it might, in a certain way, challenge us in our humor because you never know if the show's going to be on at 4 p.m. or 4 a.m., so you can't write a question that works specifically at one of those times. So it might actually make our writing improve.
What game shows would you like to see get rebooted in the near future, and what game shows would you possibly like to write for one day?
That's a tough one. I mean, the answer for a long time would have been Double Dare, and then Nickelodeon had to go and ruin that fantasy for me by bringing it back and doing a good job of it. I don't know that there's one that teams right to the front of my list. I guess the aforementioned Scrabble is certainly one of those ones that I feel was just perfect from beginning to end. A great big old carnival of lights and buzzers and whatnot as a set, but a great game that uses all those recognizable things and great writing. So that would probably answer both questions. I'd love to see that come back, and I would definitely like a whack at doing some of those clues because it was a fun show for me to watch.
And speaking of the word recognizable, I know you work with one of the most recognizable people in the game show industry, Wink Martindale.
Yes, he is a heck of a lot of fun. It's funny, some people think he is just the face of it, but he's literally got a Dropbox in his computer where if he's at some event, he's Dropboxing photos from it to be posted on there. He doesn't do the posting himself necessarily, but a lot of the actual text of what you're reading because it's his thoughts and what he's up to around town. And he's got a great home studio, and he's on the computer all the time reading articles and sending things and whatnot. So he's very active in that, and his Twitter account is lighting up. I always say his Twitter account is like if he were still on the radio today, because he's giving you all these great this day in history bits of trivia and things like that. So he's great. Obviously, we talk all the time.
And I'm a huge fan of watching game show pilots, as you might expect. So it's so much fun watching these game show pilots that resurface on Wink's Vault.
Yeah, it was wacky. The first time I met him, he says, hey, I found a copy of The Last Word pilot. You want to watch it? And it's just funny to see that he's got that same glimmer in his eye that some of us game show fans do. And he had beta tapes in his garage that we had to go get converted of different things that haven't been seen forever. So we always try to talk him down sometimes. He's thinking about getting rid of different storage units he has. And we say, no, that could be interesting stuff in there. You don't want to necessarily get rid of that. Not that I want to spend Wink's money for him, but that's always a concern of mine. You never know what gold he's getting rid of.
Right, and I'm sure it's such a thrill to work with a game show legend like Wink.
Yeah, that voice hasn't changed in decades. It's still a thrill to hear that.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of having Wink as my special guest on the game show, and he's not only knowledgeable in the hosting side of game shows, but the producing side of game shows as well, and so brilliantly knowledgeable in the game show genre as a whole.
Yeah, and that's the crazy part is because he's had just a bigger career, if not bigger, in radio and in music. He recently had a monumental birthday celebration at a restaurant out here, and the number of people from all walks of life. I was privileged enough to be in the quote-unquote game show corner, as he dubbed it, but there was Pat Boone and Marilyn McCoo and, different singing stars you would know, and then other people from different walks of his life. So the fact he knows so much about it, and yet it's not his entire career, is fascinating unto itself.
And before we get to the game, what's next on your game show timeline? What are you working on next?
I'm well involved in different consumer products for Jeopardy and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, so I'm always excited to tell people about playing that. The skill on Echo, the Amazon Alexa devices, is just a lot of fun to play because you finally get to do what I've always dreamed to do as a kid with a video game, and that's just save my answer, or question my clue, as it were. So we have that and the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire out for all the Amazon Alexa devices, all the different apps I get to be involved in. So that's what I always am working on now. But there's always shows around the corner. It's weird how there's a new show starting on cable just within this month that are coming knocking on the door for resumes and whatnot. So that's the crazy thing that I don't think a lot of people realize specifically about game shows is that, Match Game, we did 3 shows a day, and Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune can do 5 and 6. So our seasons are rather short, and we can all do multiple shows within the year, and they staff up like a garage sale going up. The table's up, and then all the merchandise is gone, and you're down the street to another sale. So I don't know what the rest of my year holds, but that's certainly what it's holding right now.
And that's what's great about the game show industry.
Yes.
Well, Jason, we have reached my favorite portion of the game show, and as someone who works in the game show industry, I would think this would also be your favorite segment as well. It is time for the game of the day.
Game of the day.
Now, usually you're the one behind the camera writing match game questions, but today you are going to be a contestant filling in the blanks to my match game questions because it's time to play a game I like to call Mutual Friend Match Game. Mutual Friend Match Game. And here's how we play Mutual Friend Match Game. I have cleverly crafted 6 of my own match game questions and labeled them A, B, C, D, E, and F. You'll pick a letter, I'll read the question, and as you know, your job is to fill in the blank with an answer. Now, you're probably wondering why this game is called Mutual Friend Match Game. Well, before the show, I sent the same 6 questions to 3 of our mutual friends, game show producers John Ritchie Jr. and Aaron Solomon, as well as the host of Nick Arcade, Phil Moore, and asked them to fill in the blanks with their own answers.
Well, if that isn't a motley assortment of minds, I think we're going to get one match between all of us for the entire day.
Well, those are your panelists, and the goal throughout the game will be to match their answers. You'll play all 6 questions, and by the end of the game, if you scored 6 points or more, you will be deemed a winner. Those are all the rules. Jason, are you ready to play?
I am ready to play.
Then let's play Mutual Friend Match Game. Now, this is Match Game, so I think a proper panel intro is necessary. So without further ado, get ready to match your friends. Two-time game show guest John Ritchie Jr., Aaron Solomon, and from Nick Arcade, Phil Moore, as we play the Friend Frenzy No Money Mutual Friend Match Game. And now, here's the star Mutual Friend Match Game, Bradley Clarke. Thank you, Johnny Olson. Welcome to Mutual Friend Match Game. And now that the intro is out of the way, we are officially ready to play. All right, Jason, remember, 6 points are needed to win the game, and it's time to pick your first letter. A, B, C, D, E, or F.
I would love to start with A for antifreeze.
Here we go. The Hollywood director said, I've made a casting change for the next Marvel movie. Blank is going to play Captain America. The Hollywood director said, I've made a casting change for the next Marvel movie. Blank is going to play Captain America. Whenever you want to give your answer, go right ahead.
Well, I think if only to see him in the costume, I think I'm going to say Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, alrighty. John Ritchie Jr. said Trump, you got a match.
We're simpatico.
Aaron said Nancy Pelosi. And Phil Moore also said Trump, you have 2.
I'm a third of the way.
Excellent start. You have 2 points and 5 questions left. Which letter next?
Let's go to the other end and try the F question, please.
The F question. Count Dracula said to his bride, good news! I'm starting a candy company called I Want to Suck Your Blank. Count Dracula said to his bride, good news, I'm starting a candy company called I Want to Suck Your Blank.
A lot of times when it comes to these questions, I like to go for the rhyme, and the other writers at Match Game ask me why. So in lieu of something that rhymes with the expected word blood, I'm going to say lollipop.
Lollipop, very good answer. Let's see what the panel said. John said lollipop, you're up to 3.
Oh, fantastic.
And you are 2 for 2 so far with this question. Aaron said lollipop as well. Phil, on the other hand, said bit o' honey.
Dracula's going to be there for a long time then.
Yes, exactly. Well, you have 4 matches, and you still have 4 questions left, so pick another one.
Yeah, it was very apt of you to not say correct answers, because a match is a match. I don't know that it's correct. I'm going to try E.
E it is. Here it comes. After a long day of work, Paul the potato farmer went to the bar. By the second hour, Paul was blanked. After a long day of work, Paul the potato farmer went to the bar. By the second hour, Paul was blanked.
Well, in light of recent changes in laws in states, I'm going to say baked.
You're going to say baked, okay. Now remember, you need 2 to win, and let's start with John. John said mash. No match there. Aaron said baked, you got one. You need 1 to win. And Phil Moore said baked as well, you got it!
All right.
It's funny, when I came up with the question, I thought smashed was going to be the definitive answer, but it looks like it was baked.
You know, that's a regionalism. It's the reason I didn't want to go there, because we don't call them smashed potatoes, so I decided to go green.
Well, it worked for you because you have just won Mutual Friend Match Game. Now, just for fun, would you like to play the other questions?
Sure.
You have B, C, and D left. Which one would you like?
Let's try C.
C says, have you heard that Tarzan and Jane have parted ways? Jane got tired of looking at Tarzan's blank. Have you heard that Tarzan and Jane have parted ways? Jane got tired of looking at Tarzan's blank. Now, this is a family-friendly radio show.
Well, surely she could be looking at his loincloth.
Very good answer. Very good answer. John went another direction. He said, in quotes, hairy chimp. I have no idea what that means.
Sure.
Aaron said vine. And Phil said red vine. So you got no matches.
Well, Phil must know something I don't.
I think he was answering the candy question for that one. But that's funny because I thought loincloth was the definitive answer.
And again, as far as success on Match Game, some people just hear the question a totally different way than you intended.
Right, that's right. And that's what makes writing so fun for the show.
Yes.
B or D?
Let's look at question D.
D says, Billy is the world's weirdest carpenter.
How weird is he?
Instead of using a hammer to put his nails in place, Billy uses his blank. Billy is the world's weirdest carpenter. Instead of using a hammer to put nails in place, Billy uses his blank. What does Billy use?
I'm going to say, because he surely has his tetanus shot, his foot.
His foot, okay. John said a body part, but I'm going to refer to it as the man hammer.
I see.
If you get my drift.
Yeah.
Aaron said forehead, and Phil Moore said head as well. So no match there.
Mikey's going down.
Well, that was more of a round one question. There was a lot of answers for that. Well, good thing you already won.
We'll lift all this up in post. I will look superior.
Right, exactly. There's no editing here.
Darn it.
Well, you have question B. Here it comes. Dumb Dora is so dumb.
How dumb is she?
She only used blank to pay at JCPenney's. Dumb Dora is so dumb, she only used blank to pay at JCPenney's.
I'm going to say pennies.
Very good answer. That's what I think is the definitive answer. John said coins. Now, usually what happens is that generals don't match with specifics, but what do you think? Should I judge that correct?
Well, yeah, that's how we've decided to judge it these years, too. But yes, in the 70s, those might not have matched.
Yes, so I would say coins is a match. Aaron said pennies. You got an exact match.
All right.
And Phil said Bitcoin. That was a clever answer. I didn't think of that.
That's very smart.
So you finished with a total of 8 matches, and in terms of who you matched with most on the panel, you tied with John and Aaron at 3. However, you still did well with Phil as you matched him twice.
But Phil brought all of his ebullient personality to the proceedings, which was really priceless.
That's right, yes. Bitcoin, I thought, was a great answer. And I didn't even think of that one. Red Vine, classic.
Yeah.
Is it tough to judge those types of questions on Match Game? Because you're looking for specific answers, and then sometimes similes come up or things that could be a match come up.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult and something that I personally wish had a bit of a rein-in on, because I would rather see funny answers in place of these sort of serious, more drilled-down answers. So, yeah, it gets difficult. But on a different level, you can sort of appreciate that they're trying to judge by intent, which is how a lot of people play games at home. Certainly, you and I are probably both experienced in drawing games, any word-guessing games. Sometimes it serves the game to judge it specific, and other times it doesn't. So, believe me, a lot of those decisions take even longer than you see on TV, because there's a lot of hemming and hawing back there and a lot of weighing in of opinions.
You don't want another schoolhouse riot.
No.
For those of you listeners who don't know what that is, go on YouTube, type in Match Game Schoolhouse Riot. It's a sight to see.
It's one of my favorites. There's a difference of opinion between whether a finishing school is a school. And when my dad first saw that question, he agreed they were not a match, because that was where you go to learn etiquette. And apparently there was a bit of a disagreement.
Yeah, exactly.
What have you got, Deborah Lee?
Finishing school.
Finishing school is another match. That's 4 for him. Dumb Dora so dumb she sent her cultured pearls to...
School of Finishing.
School of Finishing.
What?
Now, wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
School.
Hold on.
If scuba diving school.
Hold on. Now, wait. Hold everything here. Hold on now.
Finishing school is
It's
not
the
a school?
same as scuba diving school.
Now, what did you say? Did you say school? Please?
Yeah, finishing school.
Now, Now, wait just a second. Will everybody just shut up for a second there?
I'm arguing this to the end.
She said finishing school.
Yes, I put it down, but I have it.
Did you
It's in
match
here.
her? Did you? Oh, all right.
Well, then, what do you mean? You're telling me the word college is
College
better than
is
school?
school?
Hold everything
Oh,
now.
no, wait.
No, I'm
Let's
sorry.
go.
We
No,
will
I'm
not
sorry.
continue.
We're saying school.
That's a school.
He said scuba diving. No.
The word is on there.
Now,
That's the match.
we will all do a chorus of the Marseillaise now, and all the revolutionaries will march in the street.
Well, no, I think you've got to take the college away from them as well. Then we'll really have a riot.
What's the difference between scuba diving school
I don't know. Talk to him about it later.
No, I'm not taking my card down. No, I'm not.
Goal. That's great. It's cool. I can't believe that. One of the things I love to watch about revivals is seeing how questions are judged from time to time. Every version has their own producers and judges, so it's interesting to see what would be a match back in the 70s with Ira Skutch and what would be a match now.
Yeah, with the Supreme Court that's back behind the wall there, I at least on a certain level appreciate that it involves more than one person, because there could be a day where one person absolutely does not think that a level is a tool, and if 3 other producers definitely think it is, then they go, all right, I guess that's in a toolbox.
Yeah, you can tell which ones that the wheels are turning in terms of matches or not.
Right.
Well, thankfully, there was no Schoolhouse Riot on this episode, so congratulations again, Jason, on winning the game with 8 matches, and thanks for playing the game of the day, Mutual Friend Match Game. Mutual Friend Match Game. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being my special guest on this episode of The Game Show to talk about Match Game as well as your other game show career endeavors so far.
Oh, my pleasure. There's not enough hours in the day to talk about game shows. It was just as much fun for me.
And like all my guests, you always have an open invitation to come back onto the game show whenever you want to talk more, just to play another game.
I appreciate it.
Alrighty, well, take care.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of The Game Show. My thanks once again to game show writer and producer Jason Antoniewicz for being my guest today. I had so much fun talking about your career in the game show industry so far, and I hope that we have many more game show chats in the near future. Now, I know this episode might be over, but that doesn't mean you have to stop your game show listening for the day, because you can check out all of my previous episodes of The Game Show by logging on to www.soundcloud.com/Bradley_Clarke, that's BRADLEY_CLARKE/sets/The Game Show. That's www.soundcloud.com/Bradley_Clarke, that's BRADLEY_CLARKE/sets/The Game Show. Plus, don't forget to like The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke on Facebook and follow The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke on Twitter using the handle @TheGameShowBC and #TheGameShow. But of course, be sure to tune in next time for another exciting episode of The Talk Show, all about the world of television game and competition shows, The Game Show. I'm Bradley Clarke, the Bradster, and I've got to go make sure Billy, the world's worst carpenter, doesn't use his blank as a hammer again. Bye for now. The Match Game audio clip is courtesy of the ABC Television Network.
This edition of The Game Show was created and produced by Bradley Clarke and was recorded at the WRHU studios. This is Austin Angelo speaking.
The Game Show is a Bradley Clarke production. Get your game on.